Well, surprise, surprise, it appears that Americans' interest in impeachment is fading. Who could have predicted that? So what should the media have been talking about instead?
Team Rising is here to weigh in. Colin Rohero is a Democratic strategist, and Marshall Kosloff is a media analyst. Okay, guys. We have this fantastic chart that Axios put together about interactions per article on stories about impeachment. So basically, if you look at that over the weeks, you can see that at the beginning, you go, about 1,000. Now look at that. 40% drop in the number of interactions on stories about impeachment, aka Colin, people don't care about impeachment. We've talked about it from the very beginning. I mean, so let's first of all, let's focus on that, which is that the idea is that first of all, the details are super convoluted. B, it has no impact on the day-to-day lives of Americans. And C, a lot of this was just baked in, and the fact that we know that a presidential election is coming up has led to this. So what should the media have? A, what do you think about the handling of the story from the beginning? And B, what do you think they should have been covering instead?
Well, I think A and B are connected, they're intertwined.
Yeah.
The Democrats never made this a simple argument that people could easily digest.
Right.
And then C, they never showed how it could potentially impact their lives. And I think that it was as simple as the following. Look, the president asked for a foreign government to help me beat my political opponent. And Republicans, if you don't think that that's wrong, then write a piece of legislation to make it legal for all of us to do it.
Sure.
And see how they respond. Then Americans, I think, would understand it. It wouldn't be a convoluted, 10 different issues of impeachment. And then I think we could have moved forward on it, and it would have been a good thing. Now, the argument that, an election is coming is somewhat powerful to the layperson, but not if they see how this actually could affect them in the future.
Okay, well, so I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that the framing that you laid out is a lot more useful. What does this chart tell you, Marshall?
The chart just tells me that I think at the end of the day, impeachment has always been a super DC-centric, super East Coast-centric story, and it doesn't actually reflect people's interests. I think that's a great articulation from a messaging perspective of how this should have been framed. Like, you should have definitely been helping out on that.
Pelosi should have called it.
I hope someone's watching that. But the actual issue is, people are not talking about this on the campaign. Look at candidates like Eric Swalwell, who basically based their entire campaign on impeachment. They crashed and they burned.
Or Kirsten Gillibrand, whose whole brand was, I'm the most opposed to Trump in the Senate. Gone.
Exactly. Kamala Harris, she's a prosecutor.
No we'll prosecute Trump.
Cares.
Justice is on the ballot.
Didn't work out.
I mean, I hear what Colin is saying, and he's way more effective messenger than anyone that's running the show over there. That goes without saying. There was, at the beginning of this administration, such an organic, in-the-streets energy of opposition to this president. And Jeet here over at The Nation wrote a great piece about this, how instead of seizing on the concerns that people in the Democratic base and independents actually have about this president, of which there are many, concerns about how he's caused real harm to real human beings. I could go down the list, as I often have. That organic energy was never channeled in the direction of impeachment movement or that kind of, remove him from office or force him to resign. It was never channeled in that direction. Instead, they seize on this esoteric, elite-driven narrative that at its core is about reinforcing the bipartisan, national security state consensus. And so, of course, people have to be ginned up all day, every day to care about this at all.
And that's the thing, Colin. I mean, what it was is, and the reason you see these interactions go down in this way, I think, is that it all began with, remember the millions of people who tuned in to watch James Comey, that testimony? That was, oh my God, it was huge. Millions of people watched. But then nothing really happened. And then the Mueller report happened. And then Ukraine Gate. And then Sondland. And so the promises kept coming, is when Comey testifies, smoking gun, it's going to happen. Whenever a Mueller report comes out, smoking gun, he's finished. Whenever Mueller testified, smoking gun, he's finished. How many times can people be gaslit? And that's how you get to the 40% drop so quickly over this story. I think that's really what it was, is that at the very beginning, they just kept grasping at straws.
Well, when you were promised the P-tape,
when you were promised
military
straight up Russian collusion, and you get this. it doesn't work out so well. And that, from a messaging perspective, I think that's a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, look, people, it's the essentially people crying wolf, right?
Yes.
Like they've cried wolf a few times here, and then it hasn't come to fruition, and the American public and the electorate are like, okay, again?
Yeah.
You know, but again, if they would have done a good job of messaging this, I think they could have made it more relatable to Americans.
So Marshall, what have we missed? While the media has gone wall to wall on impeachment,
Since
which
September.
of course this was entirely predictable, and before that the Mueller report, and before all of this has been going on essentially the entire administration. What have we missed?
Yeah, and I think this is a really sort of depressing but also hopeful story about the media, because what we have right now is there are 30 trillion different impeachment podcasts out there. Like there's like an impeachment report.
Slow burn.
With slow burn, all those sort of things. What we're missing is the fact that Andrew Yang is outlasted governors, senators.
Right.
He's up there. That means something. Tulsi Gabbard, at the same time we're having the Afghanistan papers come out, is running a campaign against endless wars. Yeah. These are deeper stories that matter.
The Afghanistan papers.
Exactly.
Papers, right?
And obviously, like we have like great power competition with China and Hong Kong. Obviously, like that's not like a massive market of people, but there's definitely an audience of people who are looking for something deeper, who are being served by these candidates that we're talking about today. And it's really depressing that no one's really figured out there's something there.
The Hong Kong story. I mean, we've covered it up here. World on fire. All these massive numbers of protests that we see around the world.
To me, that's
the Democratic primary. I mean, there's so many stories out there which have. I mean, what did we cover yesterday? Manufacturing index on decline. About limited number of economic, the very small amount of economic growth in the swing states, Colin. I mean, isn't that the most effective message against Trump?
100%.
Yeah,
and I have been saying this for a long period of time. I'm saying, hey, look, in all the states where Trump promised to bring back manufacturing sector is failing.
Yeah.
And so that's all Democratic candidates need to be talking about. As Trump is marching around saying promises made, promises kept, we can look at the reality of this situation. And instead, they're running, kind of a cultural war against him, which I think is ultimately ineffective, because in the Democratic primary, everybody's in the same place on Trump. Give us some hopefulness. And then if you want to talk to the rest of American people, talk to them about reality.
I mean, the fact that the neoliberal world order is like burning down before our eyes.
You okay, Crystal? Try to sound sad for the past.
Heartbroken about it personally, but that it barely merits a mention in the mainstream press. That instead they fixate on these details of who called who and did he pressure Sessions to do this and how was Corey, all this stuff from the very beginning, and you're missing this big picture story that is literally shaping the entire globe right now. I mean, it just tells you everything you need to know about the way that the media would rather spin up these minor conflicts of the day than actually deal with and let people focus on the core issues. Because if they do that, that's an indictment of them as well.
Oh, it really is. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Guys, always appreciate you all. We'll have more for you right after this.